Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. This episode is another game review, and I will be covering the game between the Atlanta Falcons and the Detroit Lions, two of the NFC teams that have started the season looking pretty good. I thought this game would be the first real test for the Lions whilst they've won their first two games. They weren't against the most impressive opponents, thought their defence would get a real test today. That turned out to be the case. As always, not really going to talk too much about stats in this one. Going to analyse how both teams attacked this game, what they did well, which players particularly stood out, and look to the future for both of these teams. So I'm going to start with the Lions, who were about as narrowly defeated as you can be. Firstly, a small complaint about that runoff rule. That's a bit rubbish. I say a bit rubbish, it's very rubbish to have the Lions literally inches away from winning the game and to have that stupid 10-second runoff end the game on the spot. I'm not a huge fan of that rule at all. I think it was just a very anticlimactic end to that game. Certainly would have been nice to have another play. I think the result was fair. Before I move on to the Lions offense though, the Falcons did dominate this game. It was only a few big plays from the Lions defence, mainly the Falcons' own doing, that kept the Lions in this game. The Lions offense had its usual issues when they struggle. Once again, very little run game. No push up the interior at all. The only sort of runs they managed to get any kind of success on were runs to the outside. It's been a big problem over the last few years. Amir Abdullah is a player I like, but he's not getting a lot of help, and he's not the kind of player that's going to churn out yards, difficult yards up the middle of the field. He's more of an evasive kind of space back, and they're not currently good enough up front in blocking to create those holes regularly. On the Falcons side, they're clearly looking to send 5 men on just about every play at the moment. I think partly to make up for Vic Beasley's loss, although I do think the rookie Takk McKinley really played pretty well in the second half of this game. He managed to get some pretty good pressure and managed to get a sack. So that's been a big problem. The pass protection was reasonable in this game. I think Stafford was a bit too conservative considering what the Falcons were doing defensively. I think he could have certainly taken a couple more shots. There was one beautiful pass that he did make I believe it was in the third quarter though, to Marvin Jones. Lofted ball over the top when he was under pressure. That was very good. Stafford, all things considered, it's fairly typical of this modern version of Stafford. Doesn't take too many chances. This was a game where I feel he could have done with taking a few of those. I'm not enormously convinced by this Falcons secondary, and I think he felt the pressure often in this game. Falcons didn't do a great job of getting to him, but he was struggling to get comfortable in the pocket throughout this one. As I say, Falcons were pretty aggressive with getting guys after him. As a result, he was forced into settling for a lot of short throws. It felt like the Falcons' defence was sitting on those. The Falcons' game plan, I think, defensively, very much a successful one. And the Lions, I think, they wanted to run the ball better to try and churn clock in this game. They tried to stick with it, but there just was very little success. In the second half, of course, they were down for the majority of it. Started to become a lot more predictable and featured Stafford throwing the ball a lot more. Didn't really work out for them. I think that was the time when they could have maybe tried to hit some draw plays, maybe some screens. Screens have been very absent from their game plans so far this year. They just looked a little bit easy to defend. Receivers not doing a great job getting separation throughout this game. It seemed most of the time that Golladay, Jones and Tate were locked up for the vast majority of it. The one time you saw someone really running free was Tate on his touchdown run. Touchdown pass was just an in. Two guys going with the receiver going over the top into the end zone. And in the end, it was an easy throw, an easy touchdown pass. But other than that, this Lions offense really struggled to get going, constantly getting bogged down. I blame the run game as the primary culprit. There was just no respect for that run game, so play action wasn't really an option, and as a result, Lions offense incredibly one-dimensional. I feel like the game plan ended up just sort of going out the window, and it became a case of Stafford just trying to beat them with a short passing game. It wasn't nearly consistent enough. Receivers, I think, struggled in this one, even though they did make some tough catches, but struggled to get separation. The offensive line didn't have a great day by any means. Falcons defence, conversely, played really well, so a lot of credit has to go to them. They're just playing with a lot of confidence right now. This is a really fast group that flies to the ball. In throwing basically 5 guys, almost every single player as a minimum toward the backfield, they were able to simply overwhelm this Lions line, particularly against the run. And as a result, Abdullah really struggled to get anything going. Theo Riddick made a couple of plays in the passing game, but there really wasn't much else to say for them other than that. Did a good job of forcing Stafford into second and long, third and long or intermediate situations, and just clamping down on receivers, getting enough pressure that Stafford had to attempt a lot of difficult throws in this game. And generally, they were hitting hard. There was a lot of big hits. Brian Paul in particular, there was one from Deion Jones as well. There was a monstrous hit on Theo Riddick out in the flat. And this looks like a confident group that they're playing that way. Got a lot of pressure. As I say, Tack McKinley I thought played pretty well. The interior was getting some push. Stafford didn't have the ability to step up. You've seen Stafford running a fair bit this season, but they contained him within the pocket. Didn't have too many opportunities to get that going in this game. And the secondary had a really solid performance beyond the sort of barrage of flags at the end of the game that could have ended up costing them. I thought they did a great job locking guys down in man-to-man coverage, which when you're blitzing as much as the Falcons were, you've got to be able to do. His team is significantly better with Desmond Trufant in the lineup. He's a stud, and he did a really good job on Marvin Jones in this matchup, who had an okay game. But on the whole, the Falcons' defense clearly won this side of the matchup. If it hadn't been for the interceptions from Matt Ryan, I feel like they done more than enough for this game to be a very comfortable victory for the Falcons in the end. As for the Lions' offense, I think there's a lack of high-end talent on this offense beyond Stafford, and that really showed in this game. Weren't able to generate weren't really able to generate any big plays over the course of the game. Eric Ebron is just such an inconsistent target at tight end. The receivers are solid, but there's no real go-to guy there. And once again, the run game has been a big problem for a while now, and as a result, Stafford was once again forced to try and carry this game, and wasn't able to do it. Having to settle for some long field goals. I mean, Matt Prater had a heck of a day, but that's really what kept him in it, along with the turnovers, but nowhere near productive enough. I worry about them against top defences based on this performance. They got to play Minnesota next week. That'll be a real big test for them. I think the Vikings can do a lot of the same things this Falcons team does, but if anything, they can do it better. So I think it's going to be another big test for them. Not a disastrous performance from the offense by any means. They played a pretty clean game, some stupid penalties at times, often pretty big times. There was a TJ Lang one in the first half that was just absolutely stupid personal foul penalty that killed a drive. But yes, gonna have to be sharper, and they've got a real test coming up next week. And to sort of summarise the Falcons' defence, yeah, really good performance, pretty convincing in this one. Tack McKinley can play like that every week, then when Beasley comes back, this unit's going to look really, really darn good. On the other side of the ball, the Falcons' offence was very solid in this game. The offensive line isn't performing at the standard it did last year in pass protection. The tackles in particular and not having a great time with it. I think Matt Ryan had quite a lot of pressure to deal with in this game, got hit a few times, and whilst the Lions pass rushers look pretty good thus far, I'm still not convinced it's a great one. So that's got to be a bit concerning. But to be honest, the Falcons were able to do pretty much whatever they wanted on offense for large chunks of this game. Devonta Freeman had a really big game just about every time he got the ball, particularly in the second half, up until the end when the Lions were blitzing to stop the run, to stop the Falcons running out the clock. He was getting to the second level with absolute ease. The defensive line was having no impact on a lot of these running plays, and as a result, Freeman was just churning them up. Coleman got him on the outside on multiple occasions, and it was the biggest difference between these two offenses was just how freely the Falcons could run the ball, and that opened up everything else that the offense was doing. The second touchdown to Taylor Gabriel was a perfect example. Once the Falcons sort of got going, second, third drive, they started running a lot of misdirection type plays, seeing some rollouts, some play actions, bootlegs, the kind of things the Lions weren't able to execute in this game because of the lack of a run game. And generally, there's just a lot of movement with this Falcons offense. They've been doing a lot of stuff with Julio on one side, isolated, and then bunch formations, and executing all kinds of stuff from that package, and it's been pretty successful. I think it's pretty challenging on the defense because the amount of personnel they've got, with Gabriel, Sanu, possibly Hooper in that bunch, or on the other side as a tight end, and then the two running backs, there's just a heck of a lot of flexibility and a lot of ways they can attack from that formation. It makes it very difficult, I think, for the defense to scheme against, and we saw that a fake play action to a screen to the opposite side of the field. The Lions pretty much totally bit on the play. There was about 3 defenders on that side of the field and gave Taylor Gabriel a really easy touchdown. And we saw this constantly over the course of the game, these play actions, guys getting wide open across the middle of the field. Guys had to bite because of the difficulty they were having in stopping the run. And if it hadn't been for the turnovers, the Falcons really would have run away with this game. Matt Ryan deserves blame for the first interception that he threw, because that was a horrific decision. Glover Quinn was just sat there waiting on it. Matt Ryan stared Julio Jones down. It was a very easy interception for Glover Quinn to make, to just jump the route and run it back for a touchdown. The other two are both just bad drops that get tipped up into the air and picked off by Darius Slay, who's really a massive beneficiary on both of those plays, and they kept this game alive, particularly the third interception that Ryan threw. This second of those 4 inch ones, I believe that was Sanu, who just tipped it up into the air on that one. Really allowed the Lions to get back into the game when the Falcons really were looking like they were going to kill the game off at that point. But other than that, very impressive from the Falcons. Once again, a really good job of spreading the ball around. They're not forcing the ball to Julio. You see a couple of deep shots. They've not really been able to connect on those yet this year. But he's getting them key first downs when he needs to. Sanu's doing a job. Taylor Gabriel's there for 2 or 3 big plays a game. The running backs are both playing very well at the moment. Coleman, just on the edge, is very, very dangerous on those wheel routes, the flat routes. Absolute nightmare to match up with as a linebacker. And similar with Freeman, who showed great vision throughout this game and patience as a runner. He really did give this Lions defence fits. And this was generally a well-executed and solid offensive performance from the Falcons. I think they'll be a bit disappointed they didn't do a better job running out the clock in the fourth quarter, and the turnovers will be more frustrating than disappointing, because, as I say, those two are just bad attempts at catches that ended up being very unlucky plays that almost allowed the Lions to come away with a win in this one. Defensively from the Lions, the defensive line had a mixed bag. I thought they played the pass pretty well. We're getting some very good pressure on Ryan. Generally going with 4-man fronts for the majority of the game. The odd blitz sprinkled in. They started the game a bit aggressively, but I think they quickly learned that wasn't the way to go in this one. And good pressure off the edge, but dominated in the run game. It was pretty ugly seeing just how easily Freeman was getting through these big holes to the second level, getting 8-9 yards a pop at some phases in this game. Darius Slay, I think he's demonstrated he's a top corner. He continued his solid start to the year, a couple of picks and just some pretty sound overall coverage throughout the game. Didn't let Julio beat him on any of the deep shots that the Falcons took. But this linebacking core, I think their inexperience as a group showed today. Really struggled with a lot of the misdirections that this Falcons team was running, and struggled to, as a result, get to their gaps and help that defensive line in the run game. And they're not there yet as a group in terms of their coverage ability to deal with a team like the Falcons, who have guys like Sanu and Julio that can go over the middle and are pretty savvy players in their own right. And yeah, if it wasn't for the how opportunistic they were, this wouldn't have looked good for them at all as a performance. Really, those interceptions kept the score down and kept the Lions in this game. But overall, sort of just trying to play those zones against this Falcons team, it's difficult to do. Generally, coverage just wasn't quite up to scratch in this game, but it was the run defense that really let this team down and enabled the Falcons' game plan to operate pretty smoothly throughout this performance. So a lot to work on for the Lions. I thought defensively, they looked good in the first two games. This one was the test. It showed they're not one of the top defenses in the league, not even close. But some positives there. It's just not a huge amount of talent. It feels like this Lions team is kind of operating at maximum capacity at the minute, considering the amount of talent on the field. But when they get Taylor Decker back, maybe this offense will get rolling a little bit more than it is at the moment. Although Greg Robinson hasn't quite disgraced himself. He's not been great by any means, but he's been a lot better than he was in St. Louis. Good performance by the Falcons. Just almost managed to kind of implode on themselves a little bit with a fairly shoddy defensive effort on the final drive. It worked out, but it wasn't great to see him giving up some of the penalties that they did to keep that drive alive. And just a couple of those mental errors. Sanu in particular was a perfect example of a guy looking to run before he had a ball secured that led to picks. But good all-round performance from the Falcons. They're looking a better team than they were last year at this stage of the season. The offense isn't quite humming like it was for the majority of last season, but it looks like they're getting there, and the defense certainly looks like an improved unit. And the Lions, they're going to be a tough out. Stafford is playing efficiently and keeping this team competitive. I'm just not sure they've got the talent to be necessarily competing. They may be able to ninja their way into the playoffs as a wild card, but I'm not sure how much damage they'd be able to do once they got there. And I think this game really did kind of show the gulf between them and some of the top NFC teams. The Vikings next week's another big test for them. They get an opportunity to try and sort of prove me wrong, because I'm not quite a believer in them at this point. And the Vikings look like a very good team at this point in time, particularly if Sam Bradford's back. As for the Falcons, I'm not sure who they've got next week. But, for the Falcons, it's just a case of looking to keep this thing rolling at the moment. They're looking pretty dangerous. And they've got the Bills, which... Bills' defence has looked very good this year, but you'd expect the Falcons to have a comfortable victory in that one. They are simply a far more talented team than the Bills are. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on that one. Falcons improved 3-0. I believe the only 3-0 team in the NFC. So you guys think they're going to be favourites to win that division and possibly be the number one seed in the NFC at this point, particularly with the Seahawks struggles and the Packers looking very beatable at this point in time. So all good for the Falcons fans. And the Lions, they'll get there. Let us know, what do you guys think? What did you think of this particular game? How did you feel about that 10-second run-off at the end of the game? Give us a shout. We've got the comment section below, the Cover Zero Facebook page. You can find me on Twitter @SimonConboy. Always happy to talk football, as you all know. And thank you so much for watching. Check more of the show out. We've got game reviews, game previews going up all the time, as well as on Wednesday, the Cover Zero live stream. It should be a live stream, if not, it'll just be a podcast. So that's well worth a watch. Me and a couple of mates reviewing all the games from the weekend, previewing all the upcoming games. It's always fun to do, so I'm pretty sure it's always fun to watch. At least here's hoping. So yeah, check that out. Plenty of other stuff on the channel. If you can like, share, subscribe, it'd be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure as always. Have a great day and go Bucks.